This conference will now be recorded.
It's this little one. Oh, I tapped the stick up the doors. Okay. Okay. Oh, they fell off. Thank you. You're very kind.
Counselor, how are you?
Hi, Helen. Kelsey, did you want me to?
With the hour of 7 o'clock having arrived and a quorum of the task force being seated, I turn it over for agenda item number 1 to Monica Osby.
Hi, everybody. My name is Monica Ostby, and Paul Engels and I are planning commissioners with South Burlington. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody, for volunteering. The Planning Commission was approached by the airport to request a rezoning change, and the Planning Commission had discussed wanting to make sure that we have community feedback before doing that, particularly from the neighborhood. And so the Planning Commission had discussed forming this task force, and staff has helped make that happen. So that's why we are all here. It's customary for any zoning requests to go to the Planning Commission, and we're basically obligated to listen to them. And so in this case, we wanted to make sure that when we do hear, the Planning Commission does review the request, we have a good sense of what the community is interested in letting us know, and the task force. And that maybe is around April. So between now and April-ish is when this task force will be reviewing information and sharing opinion. And Paul and I will be here, and Helen's here tonight, but I understand Megan Emery will be the regular point person. Kelsey just asked me to just kind of give that little bit of background. Maybe we can each go through and just say who we each are for any members of the public to know what our roles are. And then also I can just, rather than go through the agenda, just remind that tonight is really going to be like an information intake for us. I don't know if we have any members of the public online that might want to be listening in, but this is a night for us to just organize, figure out when we're going to do our meetings from now on, and there will be a chair selected. Anyone who is, I think the process would be anyone who's interested in being chair should let Kelsey know, and in our first meeting in January, we can figure that out. It might take people a little while to us to get to know each other and people to decide if they're interested in that. And Kelsey is happy to answer any questions up to that point. Should we go into just some introductions, or did you want me to talk about any other aspects?
No, that was great. I just wanted to reiterate that this is a focused task force on the specific rezoning request from the airport, and I apologize, I ducked out to make sure that the front and back doors were unlocked. I don't know if Monica said that this the airport is coming in as a private property owner that can request rezoning just like any other private property owner. Clearly they're in a different situation than most property owners in the city, but they have the right to make a request and to have process of their request like any other property owner. So yeah, if we wanted to go through the task force and say who we are and if we're representing another commission or another group coming in. Just to start things off, my name is Kelsey Peterson. I'm the new city planner here at South Burlington. I'm a member of staff and not technically a member of the task force, which is why we'll be selecting a chair at the next meeting to run meetings and run discussion going forward. So it's actually a member a South Burlington resident who is a member of the task force who's doing that management of discussion, etc. My role in this is primarily coordination between members of the task force, between the task force and the airport, between the task force and our consultant and the planning commission and city council, and kind of keeping all those parts moving in sync. So if anyone ever has any questions for me, you all have my email, and just shoot me an email and I'll be happy to answer anything. But I guess then we'll just move down the line.
I'm Helen Reilly, and tonight, as Monica indicated, I'm here because Megan Emery, another council member who I asked to serve on this task force, wasn't able to make it. So her role, I believe, will be to listen, to be in some ways a liaison to the council, but I think also participate in the discussion, the questions, the deliberations that you may make, and then share them first with the planning commission, and then ultimately, if something moves forward, with the city council.
And just to jump in as a point of technology, these microphones work best if you're about as far away as I am from them. So if you're sitting far back, people online or in the recording may not be able to hear you well.
And the green light needs to be on.
Yes, they need to be on.
Okay, I'm Paul Engels. I'm a planning commissioner, and I guess I've been a planning commissioner for a year and a half or 2 years, something. And previous to this, I was a city councilor from 2011 to 2013, and have some background in the whole relationship between Burlington and South Burlington vis-a-vis the airport, including the residential land that's become available from the homes that were demolished.
Great. I'm Isaac Bissell. I'm a member of the Chamberlain community. So I read that there.
I'm sorry, what was your first name again?
Isaac?
Isaac,
Yeah.
thank you.
My name is Kim Robinson. I'm also a member of the Chamberlain community. I live on Mills Avenue. I've lived there for 35 years. Here I am.
Kim, all right, I'm Carmen Sargent. I've lived on Elizabeth Street for 49 years. This is my starting home, but now it's my finishing home. And Kim and I were both members of the Chamberlain Neighborhood Airport Planning Committee a few years ago, and I have a real keen interest in what happens to the neighborhood, so I'm happy to serve on this.
And I'm Monica Ostby on the Planning Commission. I've been a resident of South Burlington for about 20 years now, and I'm a big fan. I've never lived in the neighborhood, but I've been a big fan of Chamberlain School for a long time, and that's what has brought me to so many neighborhood-based related meetings. So I'm very happy to be here and to listen to everyone tonight. And we also have with us Nick Longo, who we're not going to jump into your presentation yet, but if you'd like to just let us know who you are. And then we'll circle back to some meeting before we get to your presentation.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you all very much for volunteering and being a part of this and listening to this particular request. My name is Nick Longo. I'm the acting director of aviation at the Burlington International Airport. I've been there for approximately 10 years, but about 6 months in my current role. Again, I really appreciate the commitment of the city and this particular task force assigned by the Planning Commission to dive into this. My hope is to do exactly this. This is a very high level planning effort of the airport for this particular area, aligning with some of our master planning efforts, hopefully aligning with some of the Chamberlain Airport Neighborhood Committee efforts, and really open to the upcoming conversation that you all will have. So thank you very much for having it, me and the airport.
Okay, so I think the next thing on the agenda is to talk about setting the schedule. And I'm just going through this tonight. Again, I'm not as John as chair, just because we don't have one. So I think we go into just talking about setting the schedule. And I'm not even sure, Kelsey, if you wanted to discuss that or.
Sure. Yeah, so after talking with our consultant, so the basic timeline at the beginning is that our consultant, Brandy Saxton, will be writing an initial background memo using
The name again?
Brandy Saxton. Will be using some other documents that have been produced in recent years about the airport, about the Chamberlain neighborhood, about South Burlington, current zoning in the area, current land use in the area, to write a preliminary background report about the area and the rezoning request. She has indicated that the first week of January, possibly January 3rd, would be when she'd be able to get that report to me. With the intention that the next meeting of the task force would be either January 13th or January 20th. Those are both Thursdays. It seemed like Thursdays worked for many people, and that Thursdays are actually a fairly open date in City Hall. There's a lot of Monday and Tuesday meetings, but not very many on Thursdays. So I wanted to offer that as an option if anyone has strong feelings one way or the other about those two dates, with the intention then being that meetings would occur every other week, roughly, going forward.
Every other week?
Every other week, yep.
Mm-hmm.
So moving forward to be approximately twice a month. And at least 2 of those meetings would likely be replaced with the community engagement meetings that Brandy would be running, neighborhood, community-wide, and broader, for people to have, make public comment, bring in their input to those sort of public listening sessions. The intention is that to be starting in February. So we were hoping to have a meeting in January and possibly 2 meetings in January, but probably just the one, and then community engagement, and then move forward from there. So are there any particular thoughts about either of those dates?
Could you repeat the 2 dates?
January 13th or January 20th?
Can I offer that if we were all able to come on the 13th and we were able to meet again on the 27th, that would make our next one the 10th. And I just wanted to remind that the schools are closed for February break the week of the 21st. And they're closed until they'd be open again. We'd be available, the community would be available again by March 3rd. So just a reminder that during that February break, it's not a great time for the community to show up for meetings. And so if we're trying to have community feedback, trying to figure out how to either have, well, I guess maybe if you want to have community in here on the 3rd and the 17th, then maybe we do just meet on the 20th.
I apologize. Apparently there are some technical issues with the remote go-to meeting. So I'm trying to resolve those to make sure that people are not attempting to attend the meeting who are not able to.
All right, so we can discuss it then.
Yeah.
Guys. So does anyone have concerns?
I'm sorry, what did you were suggesting the 13th and the 20th?
No, it's just that if we want to have 2 meetings with the community in February, it'd be really good to avoid the February break for the families, which is the week of the 21st. So if we wanted to have 2 meetings in February, it would be the 3rd and the 17th, potentially, with us then meeting on the 20th for the first time.
Well, I prefer the 20th minutes for a personal reason. I have a eye procedure on Fridays, on the Friday after that, and I try to not, on the 14th, and I try to not be.
So are we only needing 1 meeting, Kelsey, before we bring the community in for feedback?
That was my intention, but if we wanted to meet twice, we could.
Well, Carmen, the 13th doesn't work for you. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I
Okay.
could come, but I would prefer not to.
Okay.
but I mean, I understand, I can come.
Yeah. What if well, it makes a lot of meetings. I was thinking we could meet the 20th and then either the 3rd or the 27th and get 2 meetings in before the public input. But I suppose it's possible to have public input the first week in March as well. I mean, I know she would like to have the public input in February, but if we had it February 17th or February 10th, and then again on March 3rd, that would be 2 listening sessions.
Yes, the other, Brandy did say that it's possible the listening sessions could extend into March.
So, well,
Would accommodate.
if we do end up only needing the one meeting prior to hearing from the community, that could be the 20th, and then maybe the first part of the meeting on the 3rd could be any additional stuff that we'd want to discuss amongst ourselves, and then invite community after that. Like it could be the 20th, the 3rd, the 17th. Is that okay?
Is the community input to react to
Randy Saxton,
Nick or or Randy?
Brandy, yeah. It's what the request is, and then Brandy will take the request and bring it back with her suggestions. And I guess in the first meeting back when we get to see it, we'll be discussing on the table, good God, don't even think about putting this on the table, whatever else, right?
Yeah, so
And then
the first meeting, she will be able to discuss sort of a specific schedule, a specific timeline, and further process, and that background memo. She won't have drafted options for, you know, if there were different ways to rezone as options, or there are no rezoning option. She won't have actually drafted that specific language until after the listening sessions. And I apologize for running around, but it appears there are duplicate meetings that have somehow started. So I'm going to go check on that.
Okay.
so but to your point, it doesn't sound like we want the community to have something to respond to.
Well, are they going to have anything to respond to before we've had?
Well, they'll have Nick's proposal.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll have the hospital, excuse me, the airport's request and the reasoning behind it, correct, Nick? And, you know, what their vision is. We'll have the background from Brandy. And then if public listening sessions and the focus, maybe not the only focus at that meeting, but a big focus would be to solicit feedback from the community about the plans that the airport has and any other information that we may generate or receive that would help us
Right.
make it, or help you all make a decision about what you would recommend or not to
And what
the
is
planning commission.
What is the end date for us?
Well, the original goal was to have this task force give thoughts, recommendations, communication back to the planning commission in April. So it's like a 4-month turnaround.
Yep, and the planning commission has authorized this task force to continue through May 31st. If we went past that date, we would need another authorization from the planning commission, which I'm sure they would give, but that's sort of the hard deadline goal of having the work of this task force completely finished.
And I guess I just would, to Helen's point, the dates that we've set are really just the calendar dates without agendas attached at this point. We want to make sure that by the time we ask for community input, that we have provided community with something to comment on, which right now we're not at that point. So the dates of the community input nights will be announced. We just don't know what they are yet. So thanks everyone for your patience. And the other person who will be along this ride with us is Brandy Sexton, who's up here on the screen, not in person today. But she's a consultant that will be hired by the city to work with us through this process. And so she'll be speaking with us in the agenda tonight. We also discussed that we will be voting on a chair for this task force, but we're not doing that until our next meeting. I'm just kind of guiding through the agenda tonight. because Kelsey asked me to. So Kelsey, can we go on to, would you like to verify anything before we move on to item 4?
If you could repeat the dates that were landed on, just so that
So-
members of the public know
So
what
the
those are.
meeting dates we've set so far go through March, and they are January 20, February 3rd, February 17, March 3rd, and March 17. They're all
17.
Thursdays at 7 o'clock.
Great, and I just wanted to, there was some discussion, just communication that I got about possibly wanting a change to the agenda, and I just wanted to provide an opportunity for that at this point.
Yeah, I guess I have a clarifying question. I'm assuming this is for community listening sessions. They're going to be able to join online and that this is a two-way situation.
Yes.
So I just don't see any reason why we wouldn't allow for public comment at every meeting. I think we're going to get something to react to right now. And I think that the community has plenty of time to digest the relationship with the airport and to provide comment on it. And so my suggestion would be that we have a public comment period at every meeting and that we have one meeting or two meetings that are focused on specifically public comment. But I see no reason to limit public comment in any way.
My reaction is that's premature to ask us to do such a thing because we really have no information. And I think when we're given information tonight, we really have a responsibility to listen and to respond only in terms of questioning what, if we personally have questions about it. I don't think it's a fair position to put us in or him in to have public asking questions or doing input at this point because we really don't even have a format.
I have a question for Kelsey. Are we providing minutes, Kelsey, on these meetings? And if so, who's taking the minutes? Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, the intention is we would provide minutes. It would be written from the recording that is being made by the go-to meeting,
Okay.
likely by me.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was just going to say because I'd want the public to know that if they were saying something, it's recorded because right now I think the information will be so new to us. To be fair, I don't know that we'd be able to hold on to it necessarily and connect it to what we ultimately do so that if someone's taking their time to give us comment that it's connected to something that we'll be able to strategically recall. And so it's good knowing that there will be minutes. Perhaps for tonight, since we don't have it built in so far, we listened to the two presentations. Well, the discussion with Brandy on our process, but the presentation from the airport, and our adjourn time is supposed to be 8:35. If we kind of are coming close to that, maybe we add some time at the end for anyone who might be interested in saying anything. But again, this is really just us very preliminarily, and the reason for establishing this task force was to make sure that before the Planning Commission hears anything, that an educated audience on the process will be able to give us relevant feedback. So
Yeah, no, and I just want to make sure people have the opportunity and understand that people's time are limited. They might not be able to come to every meeting. And so just having two meetings where there's public comment periods, it just feels like too few. And so we can see how it goes tonight and that's fine. But I think that it should be an opportunity to every meeting given people's busy schedules. And so that's my.
how do you guys feel about just having?
So just quickly procedurally, we will still follow the sort of motion and vote process that would happen in a planning commission, city council, things like that. So Isaac, if you'd like to make a motion that be a change to the agenda, that public comment be added after agenda item 5,
Yes.
I'd be willing to entertain that motion.
That I would like to make that motion.
Can I ask a clarifying question though? The city council, and I think the planning commission as well, always offers the public a chance to make a comment on an issue not on the agenda. Then when we get to an agenda item, you typically discuss it or have the presentation. And that would be, I think, a good time to solicit some feedback or comments from the public um, that relate to that topic. Because I know people they look at the airport, and for some, the issue is the F-35s. And I just want to say, that's not what this task force is all about. We'd need to be meeting with the Air Guard if you wanted to talk about the F-35. And that's something that if the community wants to continue that conversation, that would be an excellent topic for the council. So I think if people want to make a comment about the airport or the F-35, that would have to come at that time at the beginning of the meeting, not in the middle of, we're looking at a plan, we're thinking about the impact on whatever it is, economic development or zoning or whatever. You really need to focus the public comments on that. And I think the Planning Commission takes comments as they move along as well. So I think that will happen, given that seems to be the process the city uses for these public meetings. Okay. So that's fine. If you're.
And I would like to clarify, I'm not trying to stifle public input.
No, I'm not either.
I don't feel comfortable myself, because I feel like I'm like a blank slate. I don't really know what we're going to be reacting to. And I would like to be able to digest it and talk about it, maybe talk about it amongst ourselves, and maybe then feel more confident in listening to people. I won't have any information any different than they will.
Well, and I would say I would be interested in hearing questions from people after Nick gives the presentation in particular, because their questions may help inform us. But in terms of taking comment, I can't promise that I'm going to be able to keep track of how that comment relates, because I need to soak in what I'm hearing as well. So maybe if we ask the public for tonight, if what they want to share with us in that section is if they have a clarifying question, to share that, as that might help us.
That seems appropriate.
But then not participate in questions that are not on the agenda for tonight. So is that what you would advise, revise your motion to?
Like a good idea, to take questions after Nick's presentation, or to solicit them?
Questions on the topic?
On the topic.
So
Okay.
Isaac, is it your choice to revise your motion to accept questions on the topic of the airport proposal from the public after the proposal?
Yes.
And not general comment?
Right. Specific to the subject.
I'll second that.
Great. Monica seconds. Is there any other discussion about that? Paul?
We can't bar the public from a public meeting. It's not.
I don't think any of us want to bar the public. That's why we established the task force.
Basically, philosophically, any city meeting has to be open to the public.
Well, there's usually, this is an organizing meeting, and normally there's a point on the agenda for items not related to the agenda for people to comment on, and we didn't do that here. And that was the point, that if we complete in close to adjourn time, if there are open questions, maybe we can add that to the agenda at the end if it comes up. But our intention tonight is to just organize and take in.
Well, and that opportunity will arise at every meeting. Because one of the agenda items will be comments from the public not related to the agenda. So that's when people can say whatever issues they have with the airport, or want to make comments or whatever. But then when we get into the agenda, we really need to make it focused on the agenda item to help us, or not me, but you all and Megan, to make some good recommendations.
So if we're ready to vote on the motion, I then would the question I would have, Kelsey, is if we approve this motion, who is going to be monitoring the questions to ensure that they keep to the topic when we're in it. Will that be you, or
Yeah,
do you want me to
that will
help
have to
out?
be
Okay,
me at this point.
great.
Yep.
Oh,
Okay.
tonight, yeah.
For today, yes.
Then it'll be the chair.
Then, yeah.
Right, 'cause
If
we don't have a
future
chair.
meetings after we elect a chair, that would be the chair, but tonight it will have to be me.
Okay.
So if there is no further discussion, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. So the motion is approved and the public will be able to ask questions after the airport proposal. And with that, I think we have made it to agenda item 4, which is the presentation from Nick Longo at the airport.
Excellent. Thank you again very much. And I'll introduce myself again to those online. My name is Nick Longo. I am the Acting Director of Aviation. Again, thank you for allowing this task force to be set up from the Planning Commission and the city to really take part in this public process to identify this particular request from the airport. And as the previous discussion just occurred, all the questions coming from the community to make sure that we as an airport are introducing this as a true planning perspective. We've done a tremendous amount of work both between the city of Burlington and the Burlington Airport on planning efforts specifically with the Chamberlain Airport neighborhoods. And this is one of our latest opportunities to guide us down the road of our master plan that we recently completed, which is a required plan by the Federal Aviation Administration. All of these plans, all of the items that I'm going to show you today are related in some way. And the way I'm going to set the presentation up is guiding you not only up to what this specific request is, of course, where the request is located, because I think that's going to be a very important piece of the conversation. And then a possible conceptual idea of what and why the airport is making this specific request. I think over the years, many of you have mentioned some of the history between the airport and the city of South Burlington. This is a great opportunity, in my opinion, to make sure that we are starting off on the right foot, to make sure that this is the right fit. Because in my particular perspective, I want to make sure that this fits with the feeling of the neighborhood, with the feeling of the city of South Burlington and the great work that's been put into this particular community, as well as following some of the guides that the South Burlington planning and staff has introduced, including the latest town map. I do have myself on the go-to meeting, and I think I can share. It says to share your screen, there it is.
You have to be a presenter, right?
Yep, which I just did.
Okay.
It should allow you to share now. There you go.
Okay, how does that look? It's a bit crowded on my screen, so I want to make sure.
This is what.
Okay, okay.
No, we can see there too, but
Right, I'm
that's,
just saying.
that's easier. Bigger. Will
Okay,
you be sharing this with us?
Yes, I can share some of this with you as well digitally. I'm not sure if the letters have been sent to the committee yet or not.
The updated request letter was sent to the task force, yes.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So this is where I want to start. A bird's eye view of the Burlington International Airport and the Chamberlain Airport neighborhood. Of course, you can see the airport and the associated runway right there, which is that long piece of pavement in the middle. You can also see the Chamberlain Elementary School, and I think many of you, if not all of you, are quite familiar with that as you introduce yourself as residents in that particular area. What I'm zooming into right now is the northwest quadrant of the airport. This is off of Airport Parkway in the corner of Kirby Road. not intentional, but there is a previous label on the Google image that labels that as the South Burlington Dog Park. But that's a good reference because I think many people know where that particular dog park used to be located. And this is the geographic location, the only geographic location that the airport is specifically requesting for this particular rezone. You can see there's many uses associated with that particular area. There is a bit of history in that area, and these are previous residential locations, which is the very reason for this particular request, because this zone or this area is currently zoned residential 4 or R4 with the request to be changed to airport or AIR district. I'm not sure how you say it. This flies now into the city, I can't see it on my map, but the city of South Burlington's official map. The one reason I wanted to bring this up, and it's a very similar format to what I just showed you on the satellite image. One reason I wanted to bring this up is this number 1 circled area, which was a collaborative effort as well as a planning effort on the airport's master plan to look at the geography and the connection of Airport Parkway to Airport Drive, which is that main drive in front of the parking garage or directly in front of the airport terminal. Very future project. I don't want to get too deep into that, but one of the reasons, particularly for this zoning request, is because of those future possibilities in that area, the connection of the roadway, and the access to this particular area, not only from the street side, but the immediate access. And I'm getting even closer into that particular area. Access from the street off of Airport Drive, but more importantly from an airport perspective is access to those particular aviation use or taxiways and runways directly adjacent from these particular parcels. The final map here is the zoning map, the South Burlington zoning map, which I love the little aircraft in there. So again, a very similar image. Hopefully everybody has their bearings here of Airport Parkway with the intersection of Kirby Road. And if I think you can see my mouse right there. This is the particular area that the airport is requesting the rezone. As you can see, the orange with the white squares, I think is the color. Is the R4 section or the residential 4 section with the aircraft images in there is the overall portion of the airport that is zoned immediately adjacent, which is the airport zone.
So you're talking about also including all the outline of what you're asking to rezone isn't on that, is it?
The outline is not on there, but
so it includes what used to be Picard Circle. It isn't even a street anymore, is it?
That's correct. So here's an outline of that very image. Excuse the quality of the image. If the computer loads there. And this was part of the letter that you received, but this is the outline of that image. So yes, it does go to the top portion there, which is the mixed use industrial zone, the red and gray candy cane lines in there. And then all of that red highlighted area is the very specific request. And yes, Picard Circle is not there any longer.
And that's 10 acres you're asking for?
That's approximately 10 acres in that particular area. Not requesting any exchange of parcels or anything like that. The streets that you see within this particular area, specifically Kirby Road, or what we call Kirby Road Extension, and the area that used to be Picard Circle are not part of this request at all. It's the adjacent land, of course, owned by the airport, whereas these streets are still owned by the city of South Burlington. The final map that I'm going to show you, many maps, is a bit more complicated or complex with many different items on it, and I don't want to get too deep into this. This is, in fact, our airport master plan. If I zoomed out, this would be highly, there'd be so many details involved in this particular area. The area that we are looking at, this red road where my mouse is right here, if everybody can see that, that is the Kirby Road extension with Picard Circle just behind this ST17 label, and Airport Parkway coming around the corner down into towards White Street. The area that the airport is requesting to be rezoned is this particular area right there, as I identified previously, which leads me into the why of this rezone. Couple of reasons why we were looking at this during our master plan. One of them I stated just moments ago, where the proximity to the airfield and the access to the airfield and runway systems is a major part of this particular request. This area right here, you can see some planning efforts associated with new parking lots in a what we are referring to as a snow removal equipment, or SRE, building to accommodate some of the big pieces of equipment that you see out on our airfield all of the time, clearing snow, fixing certain situations out on the airfield. That's a major reason for this rezone. It's one of the limited areas that we are able to access the airfield, as well as have the appropriate land following the South Burlington regulations to build this property, and of course accommodate both landside, airfield side, and some of our future needs at the airport. That really is all I have to present tonight. It's not a large area, as Carmen mentioned, about a 10-acre total area. You can see from this map here, and I do have a map of the tax parcels to really identify what that looks like today. But you can see there are multiple parcels in this area that's being requested, and those are those reasons. And I'm happy to take any questions or whatever the next steps the committee would wish.
Sure. At this point, I'd open to questions from the task force members.
Yeah, I'm curious about the green colors here. And what do those represent? Because it looks like there's some green to the south of the requested area. Is that maybe a future request or a future? What does that represent?
I see. Yeah. So there's a darker color green, and then there's the lighter color green. The majority of that area is either airport-owned property today, where we own that property, or eligible properties as part of our previous land acquisition program. Most of this is related, as you can see, the darker green to the top of the page, the lighter green to the bottom of the page, or closer to the neighborhood, with the associated very conceptual idea of a roadway connecting the two airport parkway and drive locations. So that really is identifying just land owned or eligible to be owned by the airport.
And could you clarify the difference between airport ownership and City of Burlington ownership? So it's owned by the City of Burlington, correct?
That's correct.
And in order to execute this plan, would you need to get approval from would the airport staff need to get approval from anybody at the City of Burlington? Or, you know what I mean, to build buildings, or how does that relationship work?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And really this is letter A of an A to Z process, meaning there are many steps before any of these conceptual drawings or any of these conceptual buildings would take place. The first step, of course, would be the rezoning. The next step would be most likely design work, which typically, depending on the size of that particular contract, would require public comment. It would require going to Airport Commission, a City Council subcommittee, and the Burlington City Council for authorization. Beyond that, contract work would also need to go through that very same process while simultaneously going through the development review board of the city of Burlington, not only to make sure that any buildings that would be proposed in the future, which is not what we're proposing tonight, but any of those buildings in the future would have to go through that South Burlington process before anything could be built there, including additional public comment.
But you'd need permission from the city of Burlington, who is the actual property owner, correct? As opposed to the airport, who's not the property owner? Is that distinction?
It's essentially one and the same. We are a department of the city of Burlington.
Okay.
So based on procurement policy of the city of Burlington, as well as city council regulations within Burlington, this would require authorization for myself as the acting director to execute any documents associated with any development at the airport.
And you report to the mayor of Burlington, is that correct?
That's correct.
And is the mayor supportive of this rezoning?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, he is. Okay.
If you're making this request, are you making it with, you say it's a conceptual thing right now, but
I apologize, Carmen, but could you speak a little closer to the microphone so that people
yeah,
online
okay,
can hear?
you say it's a conceptual request. So what is the concept then? What would be the more closer to the end game of why you would want this land rezoned?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I will bring up the final document, which is more aligned with our airport layout plan, which is a little bit more of a detail. These are very quick sketches associated with possible concepts within that area. The snow removal equipment building that I referenced before would, of course, these are extremely preliminary, very conceptual. Any of this can be changed. The snow removal equipment building would be here. This would also be a centralized location, not just for snow removal and maintenance facilities, but also our operations department, as well as a central administration office building. This would be a consolidated focus for the airport. These other buildings on the side.
You mean for physical maintenance of the airport property?
For physical maintenance of the airport property and the associated vehicles for that.
So the gray rectangles, those represent buildings? Or what is the white space?
Yeah, my apologies. Yes, the dark rectangles within this space are buildings or conceptual building locations, whereas the lighter gray or the white space here is pavement associated with aircraft parking positions or drive lanes or parking lots connected to, like I mentioned before, connected to the airfield system itself.
It would, if they're to do with airport, excuse me, airport kind of maintenance stuff, what kind of chemical materials would you see being used for that purpose? Would they be the same kind of things you use now? Would the de-icing chemicals be held in those facilities too? Or would it be just for the runway maintenance?
Right now, the plan is just for the runway maintenance and the vehicles associated with it. We do operate our own vehicle maintenance shop, so repair shop and the like.
Go ahead.
That would be also housed in this particular building with only access from the airfield side. There wouldn't be access or driving of those vehicles on the neighborhood side of these particular buildings. As far as chemicals, very typical chemicals associated with any sort of maintenance shop, such as oils and the like. The de-icing chemicals that you mentioned, which I wanna separate between the ones that you might have seen applied to aircraft. We don't use those. Those would all be housed and are very regulated on only 3 locations at the airfield. One of them would be the terminal facility. That's the majority of where it's
And
located.
where's all this now? I mean, surely you have to have places for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the reasons for this request is because the current location is much too small for the facility that we own and the number of vehicles that we need to maintain.
And so where is that?
So it is on the south side of the airfield, closer to the intersection of Williston Road and Airport Drive. Not that quite that close. It's more central, closer to Heritage Aviation, over on Customs Drive. The map here shows that particular building, and you can see when I zoom in, this is Heritage Aviation off of Customs Drive. This is also where the customs facility is. This building right here, this small building right here, is currently where we house our maintenance shop. The problem with that particular spot is, yes, we have sufficient space for some of our maintenance, not all of it. And the majority of our vehicles are stored outside. In fact, you can see 2 vehicles on the particular map here. Those are 2 of our snowplows. Those are approximately at 100 feet in length, and we have 5 of those. So you can see, it's tough right now, but you can see the size of those vehicles compared to the size of a facility that would require the necessary maintenance, not just for those vehicles, but for close to 50 vehicles that we own, operate, and maintain.
And where is, I'm just trying to get my bearings. Where is Beta Technology, Beta Airline, whatever they call themselves, in relation to all this?
So today, here's the airport terminal on the.
Okay, so I'm really totally out of place here. All right.
Yep.
So there's the cemetery there?
That's correct. Yep. There's the cemetery right there, and Beta is just to the north there in this building, which doesn't look like that anymore, but that's where they're currently headquartered.
And that is really not visible from Williston Road? Is that what's up over the ridge there when you're going down Williston Road?
That's correct.
Okay, now I understand.
That's correct. Where Federal Express, a lot of times you'll see the FedEx tail sticking from the road over on Williston or Kennedy Drive, really.
Yeah.
You can see actually the FedEx plane parked right here, and that's where our maintenance shop is.
So your maintenance shop is right there. Okay.
Correct.
I have a question while you're there. Why wouldn't you be able to expand just on that current location? Why is the new location preferable?
Yeah, that's a really great question. There's multiple uses in this particular area that really don't conform to some of the regulations and the safety aspects of the airport. FedEx is a great example where they're located on this particular area, sharing a space with our shop, which is this lane right here, as well as small aircraft and general aviation aircraft. You can also see that FedEx is right in front of this particular hangar, which causes a highly congested area unsuitable for that particular use. Further, we do have a second runway on our airfield. This is called Runway 1, which is the white painted marking on the map here. There are highly restricted height restrictions associated with the runway, as you can imagine, and those restrictions angle out from the sides of the runway, so it's very limited to the height that we can do and no closer to that particular runway. So this is the very limited footprint that we can absolutely work with.
Can you explain some of the stuff that's next to the building there? Like, where's the building itself that you use now is where?
Right where my mouse is right here. Let me
Space
see.
around it is?
This is what we call the maintenance yard. So this is all paved area that we park. We have a fuel tank there. This is the outside of the airfield. So generally anybody can drive on this side of the airfield with some security gates on this side. So there really isn't.
Is the fuel tank for the maintenance vehicles?
It is for strictly our own
It's
vehicles.
not for airlines or anything?
No, this is strictly only for our vehicles.
Okay.
Our ground vehicles, no aircraft vehicles.
So I assume that would have to be moved as well.
That's correct. The fuel tank and the associated storage units next to that fuel tank as well, most likely as well as a cold storage or what I would describe as a pole barn to store vehicles inside of that
Are
particular
they above
area.
ground, the fuel tank?
That fuel tank is below ground.
Is below ground. Yep. I have a question.
Oh,
Are
go
you
ahead.
finished or you have some more?
No, I'm
Marty?
done for now.
Okay.
I'm,
I was
I'm
just
glad to
curious,
listen.
in the process, kind of to pick up from Isaac's question about, who gives permission and so forth. Where does the FAA fit in with this process of rezoning and reusing the property?
Yeah, that's a great question, and really goes back in time to the acquisition program when we first purchased those particular houses. The acquisition really started from incompatible land uses defined by the Federal Aviation Administration within those specific noise decibel levels. That whole process, that all of the noise mitigation programs, all of the noise maps are regulated by the FAA, which is why those houses were offered the acquisition program in the first place, which eventually goes into that airport layout plan or master plan map, which is again approved by the FAA. And that's why a lot of those areas were coded green or pink to outline airport property lines. The FAA requires airport sponsors to identify those particular areas, the uses of those areas, and the future use of those areas, trying to make sure that they're used for aeronautical purposes, as long as the communities and the airport and neighbors agree in that particular direction, or as a noise buffer zone, which most of that area, as we went through our master plan in our noise compatibility program, is identified and will remain noise buffer zone, meaning park-like area.
Okay, so is it fair to say, I know this is very preliminary, and you have identified the particular need for this equipment, shed and parking and mechanics. Or will the only uses in this rezone be for direct service, if you will, for the airport? Or are you also imagining a company like Beta deciding or asking to build something that needs an airport for their processes, but it is a privately owned business?
Sure, absolutely. Going back to the conceptual drawing there, the left-hand dark gray building is that snow building. All of these other buildings are exactly the aeronautical use, either private ownership or potential businesses associated with aviation type uses for access to that particular airfield. Again, very conceptual. There
So
are no
both,
plans.
okay.
Yeah, there's no plans. There's no company looking for that. There are conversations right now within the general aviation community to identify additional uses or geographic areas on the airfield, because there's a very high demand for these types of facilities, not just at this airport, but all state airports right now.
So could you identify which buildings were actually necessary for the uses that you described, and which ones are just for businesses and commercial use?
So this one building, this what's labeled as an SRE or snow removal equipment building, that one building is the necessary item and really the immediate forecasted future of this particular area to house the collaborative team at the Burlington Airport, maintenance, operations, and administration. These other facilities are completely conceptual based on the demand of private ownership and developers. The SRE building, funding wise, would and could be funded by the Federal Aviation Administration, whereas these other buildings are not eligible for grant funding from the FAA, meaning they would need private development funds.
So most of this request to take away open space from a community that's already devastated by the airport relates to the desire for commercial development and not for the uses that you described and earlier on. It's mostly commercial.
There's portions of both. There's portions of both the airport maintenance and facilities, as I described, as well as future general aviation uses.
Is there is there a time that the FAA has on Europe being allowed to use this land for something other than it originally was its own purpose of? Is there a time limit on that? Have you reached that time limit?
No, not necessarily.
I was under the understanding that there would have to be money paid back to the FAA if the land was used for anything other than noise mitigation when you first bought the houses. Like you could use the land to put up, let's say, a sound barrier, but you couldn't put it to any commercial use either for the airport or independent of that until a time had elapsed from the initial well, I call it a gift, really, a gift of all this land to the airport from our government.
Sure. There's no time frame associated with that. In fact, most of this land is either classified as that noise buffer zone for an extended period of time, or until our master plan or some of our maps associated with FAA requirements are changed, or future airport development property. This land was identified in that master plan as that future airport development property, which is everything to the east or to the top of this page, the east of Airport Parkway and Airport Drive.
East would be the other side of the runway.
The east
Well,
of
I mean,
Airport
just if
Drive.
you're talking right this, okay.
Correct. Yep.
So what about, has any consideration been given to the property that you own further down the road that has to do with car rentals? That's across from your
What is
car
that
repair
place? European Auto or something?
Yeah. I mean, that you already own a building there and it's already being used for that purpose. Has any thought been given to using that area for what you're proposing this to be used for? I'm asking this because I'm trying to come to an understanding.
There has been thought about using that. There's some challenges with topography in that particular area, with topography or elevation.
Because it goes up.
On both sides. It goes up from the street up on a very large berm, but on the other side of the property, there's been significant development.
They just built that up too.
Not
We're doing some maintenance on the runways there.
correct. On the other side of that berm, not built it up, but there's actually a 1,000,000-gallon holding tank for runoff for pretty much the entire northern half of.
But that's on, isn't that in Picard Circle, that holding tank?
That's not our holding tank. That's the city of South Burlington. We have generally 3 or 4.
Are you allowed to build on that holding tank?
in Picard Circle or our
Because
own?
you own Picard Circle.
We do not own Picard Circle.
Oh, I thought, because it's designated a street, is that why?
That's correct.
So South Burlington still owns Picard Circle, even though there's no road there
That's
now.
correct.
I see, okay.
Yep.
But I'm really trying to figure out, all right, where all this is and why it's, okay.
I
Because
have
you're
one.
asking for a significantly larger portion of land than the airport intends to use to get rezoned. You're asking for 10 acres, and it looks like your building would only take up maybe an acre, maybe 2.
Carmen, please lean towards the microphone.
Oh, I can't seem to talk without using my hands, but I can't stay close to the.
Yeah, we'll move this right
You can
to
move
the
the,
edge. And then
the
you can-
microphone
Well, I
itself
don't.
towards you.
I should just sit here. Okay. Do you understand what my question is? So is there a reason to ask for that much land when you seem to be only interested in one facility for maintenance purposes?
For the total land in that area in the future of the airport, that was the original request because there are opportunities in that area associated with our master plan.
And by the word opportunity, you're referring to commercial development for private development.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question sort of related to that. And that's related, I mean, I think, Carmen, one of the reasons the city might want to consider this kind of zoning change is that as I understand it, the commercial entities that may or may not happen with the other 8 acres or whatever's left, would add to our grand list and provide jobs, but also taxes. My question is, the building that the airport builds for their maintenance, I can't remember, is that taxed or is that not taxed?
Typically, the building itself would not be taxed. I'd have to reference
So
some
that
of
wouldn't
our
generate any revenue, but the
correct, but
other buildings, if they were private,
would
generate
be,
income
would be very different. Now the difference
or
here
revenue.
would be these are residential properties, part of that pilot program. The tax stabilization agreement that we agreed on a couple of years, or
Right,
more
yes.
than a couple of years,
Yeah,
which identified the specific noise acquired properties to be assessed at and taxed at a
a
specific
different
value.
rate, yes.
So this rezone would potentially change that particular assessment to be identified with the greater airport parcel itself.
Okay.
So there could be changes to that area.
Well, it is, and why did you choose this far away from the airport for maintaining the airport properties, which are way at the other end?
This
Runway properties, isn't it?
Yeah, this truly is one of the last areas that is available to develop without proceeding even further closer to the terminal building. Around the corner and to the south of the facility, there are no additional locations that could
What about
truly.
going like from where you just put the parking garage, not parking garage, the car
Quick
rental
turnaround
car
thing?
wash and everything,
Car wash thing?
and going up from that? Why is that been considered?
It has been. There's other future plans associated with that car wash facility as well as the terminal. Those are really identified to look at development of the terminal to the north towards that new car wash facility, and then that car wash facility rotating a little bit in
That
the
hotel
future.
still on the,
That hotel is still on the horizon. In fact, we're hoping to kick that off in the spring.
in spring?
Is all of this expansion that you're discussing about at the airport, does that relate it to a projected increase in flights in the future?
Not necessarily. However, even through COVID, the requirements of the airport generally stay the same, whether we have 1 flight a day or 50 flights a day. We have very specific requirements for every piece of pavement, every marking, every light out on that airfield based on the classification of this airport, not necessarily the quantity of flights. However, to address the question of quantity of flights, there are a projected and a much quicker projection of increased commercial flights as well as general aviation flights, which we've seen just in 2021 alone, about 125% increase of flights since 2019, which is really indicative says quite a bit of the stabilization of the aviation community even during the pandemic.
Yeah. And how does these increases in flights fit in with the climate action plan that's being developed at the state? Is there any engagement there?
There is. In fact, we just signed approximately a $200,000 contract with VHB to identify even more sustainable efforts at the airport, not just with building sustainability, solar. There is a windmill at the airport, but to identify some of the action items that we can take and discuss with the airline industry and with the general aviation industry, whether we're talking about fuel sustainability, less fuel, and of course electric aviation as well with one of the tenants at the airfield. So there is a significant effort, a little bit early than we expected to identify those items. I do also have a commitment to retain at least $250,000 a year for implementing some of these items from this year's action plan that we're going to be developing in conjunction with those others.
That's more than the city is discussing at the moment, I might add, in terms of having money to invest in climate change
And
potentials.
I did just want to note one thing that you'd said earlier about the increase in the grand list. And I would just hope that the city of Burlington was also considering the livability of this community and the fact that people walk through this area. I walk through that area. Every time I walk through that area, I see people walking, running with their dogs. And so what is being proposed, as far as I can tell, is that area that is enjoyed by a neighborhood that is already being harmed by the airport, that area be turned into a profitable use. And that seems like profit is being valued more than the lives of the community. And that's really disappointing. Mm-hmm. And I'm disappointed with you as well. I mean, it just seems kind of disgraceful, if I'm being honest, that this community that's already so impacted, and this open area, which actually you have great views from, you can view great views of the mountains there. And so the idea that this isn't really even necessary for the operations of the airport, it's necessary for profits. And that's the way it always goes. Working class communities are not prioritized, profits are prioritized. That's the way our world works. And that's what's happening right now.
Well, I just raised that as the other flip side of the coin. So when things are considered, whether you like the idea of profit or not, that is a motivation for some and a consideration for the city in terms of, keeping taxes down and all sorts of things.
Can I have a turn? So this is a listening night and we have a lot to discuss, but I want to share one question that I asked of Kelsey that was really helpful to me. This is currently zoned R4. I think it's important to remember the airport does currently own it. So if they wanted to put a big fence around it and not allow anyone to walk on it, they could. It's not a public park. And I frequently have to remind myself of that in general with these beautiful open spaces, but they have the right now to block anyone from using it. So keep in mind, it is already privately owned, right? Mm-hmm. But while the airport may be asking for airport zoning, rezoning, my question to Kelsey was how, what does that mean, all or nothing? And we have the opportunity here to not go all or nothing, but to say, if then what? What might within airport zoning work and not work for us? If we really cherish what we currently have access to, which, they could put a fence around and not allow, what would we ask? Say, okay, the priority of what we're hearing is X, Y, and Z. well, what is important to the community? Sound protection, open area, this very rich habitat block, as I see it. It's not an official habitat block on our map, but this is a very important area. What, instead of, it helped me understand that we have that opportunity here. And I think the most fruitful thing may be to hear about what, keep those things in mind that are really important and figure out, well, how can we make it, is it possible to find a win-win here? Or what do we have to, what do we have to hold back from the request, but gain for the community in exchange? So I didn't know that we had that flexibility necessarily. I thought, no, it's either R4 or airport. It's not. Okay, so I hope that's helpful. It helped me.
May I add one thing related to walking paths and the like? We also identified in a master plan for landscaping associated with some of the current development happening at the airport to initiate and add walking paths and multi-use paths surrounding the entirety of the airport, including connecting to our south end as well as through some of the wetlands in the south, in conjunction with current projects happening in the south, but also throughout some of these vacant properties today. We have no intention of putting any fences or anything associated with that, but we do have thoughts to encourage walking on those properties and using those properties in the future.
So could you point up here, could you point out how far down I can figure out where the terminal is here, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Can you point out, like, how far down have you built down there now?
How far down which way, north or south?
North of the airport.
North of the terminal here?
Yeah, where's the terminal?
The terminal is this building right here.
Okay, and then is that the parking garage?
This is the parking garage. This
and
is the north section.
The hotel is going where?
The hotel is going to go right here.
Okay, and then up there will be a parking lot?
And this will remain a parking lot mostly for our oversized vehicles and employee parking of the airport.
What's the white thing?
That's also a parking lot. That's aligned with our cell phone parking lot waiting area, as well as additional overflow parking. And this space right here, this roadway actually is our mutual.
It's not really there anymore, is it?
Yep, this roadway is currently there. This is our access point for all mutual aid responders.
Okay.
This is our emergency gate access point right here.
Now I know where it is.
Yep, and these are gravel lots associated with additional parking as well.
And so was any consideration given to extending it right up there where it's already developed?
Right in here?
Yeah.
Most of this land we don't own. In fact, a lot of this forested area is either wetlands or a stream right here that is owned by the city of South Burlington. So we don't own this. Our property line generally follows the edge of the tree line here.
Where are there
until
still
we get
homes
to here.
up there?
There are no longer any houses within this area.
Within that whole thing?
Correct. Within the whole requested area, this red
But
highlight.
I mean up above there.
North or
on Dumont Avenue.
North of where you're requesting, but south of where you're requesting.
No, there.
On Dumont Avenue.
Yeah, up above Dumont there.
Yep, so this is Dumont Avenue that circles around.
Homes there.
Correct, there's approximately 4 houses, I believe, on Dumont Avenue.
And then across the street on Dumont?
4 houses on both sides of the streets on Dumont in various locations.
And that white at the very end on the north, is that where you already own land? Not where the woods are, right there. You already own that piece of land, don't you?
That's correct. We do own this piece of land. We do not own in between these 2 pieces of land.
Because it's really unusable.
It could be usable.
It's ravine and stuff, isn't
It is a ravine. There was a thought to use that at some point in time, but it would be tremendously hard to use that because it's quite a deep
I think some of the new Article 12 draft would be preventing some of that
anyway.
from being destroyed.
Right.
that will be protected in
A
the new
lot of
Article
trees
12.
there we
If
want
it's
to
But
keep.
the one way down is property you own that was part of the the rental car ownership?
That's correct.
So now you own that?
We've owned that for quite some time. Currently, that is leased to one of our rental car agencies that uses that property.
Okay. All right.
I had another question about your statement versus your letter. You said it was for the maintenance facilities, but it also says as well as additional small aircraft or general aviation facilities. So might you have small aircraft housed in there? What do you mean by or small aircraft?
Not housed in that building associated with the maintenance facility, but these other hangars or other dark rectangles would be hangars or small hangars for that general aviation.
Wait, so then there could be planes, I don't know how to say it technically, but planes can drive in to this potentially. So I'm wondering from a sound perspective, are you introducing new sounds to that area that don't currently exist there? I mean, if you have, I don't know how loud a plane is going to be, a small aircraft, but if it's going to have to start there and stop there, is that, they're not like a large plane would have to be taxied over, but a small plane can drive right up, right?
Yeah, I mean, generally any plane can taxi under its own power throughout the whole airport system. The reason that
Don't right now there, because I mean, there's the runway, but otherwise there isn't that additional sound. So this building is actually, if it allows for the small planes to come in, it's actually introducing new noise.
there's a yes, the purpose of these particular buildings is to house small aircraft. The reason that most of this conceptual designs is parallel to our runway and our taxiway system is to only allow those aircraft on the other side of those particular buildings, with the concept of reducing some of the noises that are currently out there based on the taxiway. But yes, there would be new uses in these particular facilities with small aircraft, generally single engine propeller aircraft.
What would the height dimensions be of those buildings, probably?
I don't know. We have not gone that far in any of this. These are merely conceptual ideas.
The building houses a small plane, it has to be maybe 20 feet tall?
No, not necessarily. Some of these hangars have very short doors, maybe less than 15 feet tall. I don't know what the roof would be, but the hangar door itself or the tail height wouldn't need to be that tall.
So another just question, I guess, or kind of tying back in, and this is again us listening and asking questions, but if the zoning change is ever agreed to, what you're showing us today doesn't have to be what you're committing to. I mean, it could, and in 20 years, it could become something different or something different, something different.
That's
so
100%.
I think back to that question of what maybe we would benefit from learning from Kelsey. What parameters could we implement if something were put in, so that it wasn't just reliant on one building and one drawing, but if we change a zone long term, what parameters would feel appropriate for that area, rather than focusing on almost like, okay, this is a current drawing, which they said is very conceptual, but I'm thinking out like 50 years, what restraints, and so that's one thing. I guess I'm asking if you can help us learn how we can create some parameters.
So the request has been made to rezone to AIR zone, but there are other zoning districts that already exist in South Burlington that allow for some types of airport use. I can't remember their exact names off the top of my head, but my recollection is there's at least 2, possibly 3 other options. We also do have the option to modify one of those existing options or sort of write a zone out of whole cloth. It's not the most efficient thing to do, but just understanding that this is a unique area of the city, a unique property or series of properties, there is an opportunity to write a new zone or modify an existing zone to restrict or allow different uses, different building types, different sizes, all sorts of different parameters. And that is one of the things that Brandy Saxton is going to be working on down the road, is outlining some of those potential options so that this task force will have something to work from instead of trying to, come up with something out of thin air. She will likely in March be presenting some of those options for the task force to consider, that then the task force can still recommend different changes to what Brandy has recommended. So even the number of options that she presents, there's still another set of iterations past that. So there's a lot of opportunity to allow for certain uses, not allow other uses, change different requirements, dimensional requirements, and all sorts of things like that. So there's a lot of opportunity for, instead of just saying yes or no on the air version of zone, the air zone, you can choose something different. That's also an option. So you can choose air, you could choose no rezoning and it stays R4, or you can choose something in between.
So in the event that you said no rezoning,
Mhm.
how often can the airport come back and ask this question again?
As often as they want.
Yeah, there's not really a,
Because they own the property, they can, every year they can come
Yep.
back and
Right.
hope for the best.
yep, you would hope that, you would hope that they would come back with a slightly different request that addressed some of the concerns that made the task force recommend to not rezone in the previous iteration.
Mhm.
That would be the smart thing to do, is not to just come back with identical requests.
But there aren't any strict
No.
laws saying you can only ask this once a
Nope.
year or.
Once a decade. Yeah.
Paul, yeah.
Just to clarify this, you own this property currently.
That's correct.
Which means
The city of Burlington does.
City of Burlington owns this property. Yeah. That would also mean that the buildings, the private buildings that are built there can't be taxed. Correct.
We would not own or develop those private buildings. Typically, the way that
But they'd be on your property, not
they
on
would be on our property, very similar to most of the other hangars that we either own or lease out. Those are taxed because they're not specific requirements that they would be exempt. So there's very few areas on the airfield that I can even think of that are not taxed.
But taxed to the city of Burlington.
No, these are all taxes to the city of South Burlington.
Okay.
We do not pay any taxes to the city of Burlington. All taxes go to the city of South Burlington.
Carmen?
Now I would just like to understand this better too. The airport came to some sort of an agreement with the city of South Burlington, was it a couple of years ago, about their tax reappraisal?
Correct.
And how long is that agreement in place?
I don't recall offhand. It's been at least 5 years, I want to say, but I would have to confirm.
I think it was a 10-year agreement.
That
I believe
so. 10 or
so.
there
In
could have been an
several
11.
years, we'll need to renegotiate that.
But the taxes are fixed for now.
The assessment is fixed, $184,000 per acre.
For 10 years.
Oh, 284. Yep. Sorry.
Yep.
For 10 years.
Yes.
And that was considered a compromise by the city of South Burlington with the airport and the city of Burlington.
It was a negotiation that was essentially demanded by the courts. The judge says you need to come up with an agreement, or else they were going to impose something, and nobody knew what that was going to be.
But so this is fixed for 10 years. So no matter what they do, does that mean that property can't be assessed until the end of that period?
No, I think if the use changes or what's built on it.
Yeah, I think definitely additional research would need to go into this particular conversation, but from my recollection, it was the residentially zoned property that was acquired was assessed at that $280,000. We'd really have to look at that through.
So
through
I
council.
would like to, I think that should be a question that's included in this request. So if we are looking at potential tax
Revenue?
revenue, is that a reality or is that just a dream? See what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, no, I think
Yes.
that's a piece that is important to know. I have a question in terms of sort of following up with, I think what Monica was suggesting about finding a win-win and you know, what can you negotiate, if you will, in terms of allowing the airport to do X and then providing maybe a park or whatever for the city. And I'm just curious if those kinds of, again, this would be a question, are those kinds of agreements, is one able to make them given that you might be talking about a different property? For example, okay, we let them have the 10 acres for rezoning, and the agreement is all the property that they now own that used to have houses in front of the airport remains as it is now in perpetuity. So it's a park. It becomes more of a, and I know there's some issues with the FAA about the uses. So I don't know if you can have that agreement, but that to me might be part of an agreement that would serve the community in a longer term
And if there was a
way.
chair on the committee, they might say, that's a great idea to discuss at a future agenda
Right.
when we're having a conversation versus listening.
Well, yeah, but
yes.
aren't we putting out questions of information that you might want to hear?
That's why I was asking about the taxes, because the way it's presented, there could be a tax implication, but
Yeah.
then again, is there really, if there's a. if
Right.
there's a-
So we have the question on the taxes, and then the question here is simply, is it the question to the airport? Would they be open? I mean, are we asking that now or?
Open if it's a possibility.
So there are significant legal implications of that kind of offsite trading.
Right.
And we would need to check with our legal department inside the city to figure out exactly what the parameters of that kind of arrangement
Right.
Could possibly be. There are certain arrangements that are not possible, but there are others that may be possible, and I would have to leave that to our city attorney.
And I would add to that, very similar to the airport, there's, and you mentioned it as well, rightfully so, there's some Federal Aviation Administration requirements associated with that as well. The general concept, though, of coming to a solution of what could work for the community is I'm very open to that. I'm very committed to making sure that whatever the decision is in this property fits with the community, whether it's air or not, or something in between.
I recall that the previous aviation director said that the land that they own, like I suggested, like a park concept for that land that's all open on Airport Parkway up through in front of what is left of the building, of the private residences. And he was pretty clear, I thought, or am I imagining this, that could not happen, that there would be a liability that the airport would not want to take, like putting benches and stuff in there. Is that true?
There is truth to that, because not only from a land use and a federal aviation perspective, very similar to the dog park, where there were limitations on the time length associated with that particular use of the land. So there could be those implications associated with that. However, within our landscape master plan, we do want to we have identified those multi-use paths and associated items. We didn't put any benches in there yet, but that could be a possibility in that master plan, which goes through a different staff within the city of South Burlington. I believe. I don't want to speak for South.
Do you think the airport could make some positive moves in the neighborhood to perhaps give the impression of being a better neighbor that way? I'm just asking you that because I'm posing it as a question, so I can say it.
I'm extremely committed to becoming a better neighbor, absolutely. And one of those items that I truly am hoping sooner rather than later is to introduce some of these recreational paths and or park amenities within those open areas. We're not there yet. Those are associated with funding requirements with existing and current development or landscape portions of those projects or required landscape portions. And we see that as a great opportunity to contribute to that land and make sure that it's open to the public.
Yeah, I know that and this is an aside, there are some elderly people in my neighborhood who have to walk to get, they even go over to the airport to get stuff at the little store there. And they sometimes have told me that they need to rest, but there's no place to do it.
Mm.
So I think the airport could contribute to the well-being of the neighborhood and be seen as a good neighbor. But I do pose that as a question.
I have one last question. I know you have a question too. I know we're running late on our
I
agenda
do
time,
have, I
but
do have a
no, it's
question.
good.
So Nick, if you can tell us, if tomorrow we said, okay, fine, you can change the zoning on this spot, do you already have the funds to start building?
We do
through
not.
the FAA?
Not for any one of those buildings. It would take some significant time frames within the next multiple years. Not only private funding for those particular buildings, which has not even been discussed with any tenant.
I'm actually talking about the maintenance building.
And the maintenance building, we would also have to go through some effort with the FAA to access those fundings. It is on our capital plan with the Federal Aviation Administration to upgrade our maintenance facility for very specific reasons. Most of the equipment that we own is federally funded, therefore they like it to be maintained.
Sounds like a plan.
And so that's more free money if it comes from the FAA.
Those are grant funds from the FAA, correct?
Wow, piggy bank. Oh, excuse me. That's
With significant grant obligations associated with those, including operating an airport.
Yeah.
So at this point, if there are no further questions from the task force, we have one member of the public in the in-person audience that I'd like to ask if she has any questions, and then we'll move to any.
I did have one more. Okay, my last question was just, you showed us a very complicated, big future master plan. This being one piece, if this is the only thing that ever comes to fruition, is it still a change that you would seek if you knew that there was no other future changes from that master plan that would be agreed upon with the city, with South Burlington? Would this one piece still be worth it for you to pursue these buildings?
With the one piece meaning?
Meaning this one particular change, that you're not going to have the road connectivity with this, you're not going to have all of this other green and the bigger, you wouldn't, that's not part of this.
That is not part of this.
So if none of this were ever to happen though, if none of that was ever approved by South Burlington ever, would this piece still be what you would ask for? It would still be necessary and helpful?
Absolutely. I think this is a critical component to the maintenance facility of the airport. So regardless of any of these future master planning pieces, this one piece here is a highly critical function for us to proceed
the commercial component as well, or?
The commercial component could be adjusted in some capacity. One of the reasons that we looked at this particular area for the commercial component simply is because there's no additional space to do those particular buildings.
Okay, thank you.
Great. If the task force now no longer has questions, if there's any questions from the one women in the audience. And if you do have questions, if you could state your name and actually
Come up to the
either come
mic.
up to this
Yeah.
mic or that mic over there.
Hi, my name is Camille Clark. My concern would be about how this would affect the funding for the noise mitigation related to the F-35 and how, where does that stand? Because I haven't really heard much about that.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. These are separate funds from any noise mitigation grant funds from the FAA. Different legislation, different bucket of funding that is not associated with development or building within the FAA. The commitment from the FAA right now is $5 million annually, specifically for the noise mitigation program. There's always opportunity, and we have seen grants higher than that in past years, and we'll continue to advocate for additional grant funding. We have initiated that noise mitigation program right now. I don't know if the committee wants me to move into that conversation now, but I'd be happy to fill that in either now or at other forums if that's
It would be great if we pursue that at a later date. Just we're trying to keep this very focused on the rezoning request. Do you have any follow-up questions?
That would be it.
Okay,
mostly.
great. Could you spell your name just for the record?
It's Camille and then Clark without an E.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
And I'd be happy to follow up with you personally as well.
Okay, and we have a few people who have requested to ask questions. Just as a reminder, this is limited to questions from the airport at this time. There will be future opportunities for further comment on the airport proposal, but at this point, if anyone has a clarifying question that they would like to ask of Nick Longo, I'd be open to that. And it would be great if you could turn on your video and your microphone. Roseanne, it looks like you have a question.
Yes, and it has to do with the map that Nick presented. What caught my eye was the big number 1 on it, which led me to wonder, is there a number 2 or a number 3 coming? So my question is this the first of perhaps more requests from the airport for rezoning? That's my question.
There is no additional requests planned from myself or the airport at this time in the future. Not sure what the number 1 was, but this is the only zoning request from the airport.
Well, but if you have that master plan, though, there would probably have to be some future request for the greens that we saw. I mean, in the future, there would be some kind of request coming because
unless there's requirements by the city of South Burlington, if, for example, the roadway shifted or any of those others, we have no intention of rezoning those residential properties into a different property or a different zone rather.
Okay, I would hope that there'd be some, if the city does choose to rezone this, which I'm against, but if they choose to do that, that there would be some sort of stipulation or agreement that this would be it. There won't be any future requests. Anyway, that would be my comment.
Okay, James Lees, if you could turn on your mic and ask your question.
Okay, so I have some questions. Could you, Nick, could you show on the map or provide a map at the next meeting showing the exclusion zones at the ends of the different runways? Because you did identify that today as a problem for putting these buildings in certain places that were identified in some questions, but you kind of just pointed to it with a mouse. But we'd like to see the exclusion zone at the end of the runway so that we can be sure that there isn't any space where a building could be put. And also on your map, you had you show some green areas on existing airport land. For example, I think there's a building at the end of the big runway, the long runway, just in the north east corner. It looks like a very big building there. And maybe you could put that map up again. Is that an army building up there? No, not that map. The other one. What are you talking about?
I think maybe the overview.
Yeah, there it is. Can you turn off that one?
So one is the Army
Okay,
building.
so there's
right?
that big area, looks like a big parking lot, that one, right? Now, if you
Yep.
took the mirror image of it on the other side of the runway, down in the lower left-hand corner, bring your mouse down into that, yeah, that area. Why couldn't a building equal to that be put right there?
Sure. So to answer your first question.
Now, there may be other areas of vacant land on the airport. Looks like there's quite a bit of vacant land on the military side
James,
where
if
they
you could
have
give,
buildings,
James, if you could give Nick a chance to respond to your
many
first question.
buildings on the military side. But we don't have as many buildings on the civilian side. Maybe there's room in many areas, existing areas on the runway. Now, if you go back to the area where the present maintenance
You can't
building
hear
is
us?
located,
Turned it off because it was
can you
echoing.
just shift it over
Oh.
towards where the present maintenance building that's too small is located?
It sounds to me like his questions
Can you
are
turn that?
looking for what other areas are potentials. And since he can't, James, can you hear us? He can't hear us. Rather than
Okay,
pointing
go
to,
ahead.
it sounds like he's giving feedback for where it can go, which is good
I'm not
feedback
hearing on
to
mine.
consider. But for I think James, is your question, can you please identify other areas? Like the first question, I think is a great one. What is the exclusion zone? And if we know what the exclusion zones are, we might be able to ask, are there other areas that this could have worked instead? Does that represent, James,
Yeah,
what you're
that's
going
very
for?
good. That's very good.
Thank you.
There is this area that's like a mirror image with the mirror right where the runway is on the other side of where the Army, that very big building where the Army is. So there's that
James,
area.
thank
And
you. I think we understand the question. I'm
and
hoping
if
that
we can
you can
also
give
look at the
the
area
airport
where
an
the,
opportunity to respond.
James, do you have an additional question? We get the intention of your question. So once we get the exclusion zones, we'll be able to, that'll be something the task force can. and
okay,
you're
so I have
welcome to
some
come
other
back and-
questions. Where is Beta planning? Is Beta, the Beta company, planning on building a production facility on airport land, and where is that going to be located?
Is that public? Is that kind of some public information? I don't know if Beta's.
It's not even what we're doing.
Well, I don't think that's related to this 10 acres that we're talking about.
Not related at all. There are no prospective tenants right now on this particular zoning request.
You know, we looked at alternatives during the time when the people on the commission asked, well, aren't there alternative places? So now it's asked that very same question. Why is that? Okay, look, there's a snow removal building already existing on airport land, right? Where is that?
That was addressed in the earlier part of the meeting. It's over by Aviation Airport and Heritage, sorry.
Aviation.
And they
So
described
can
to
we
us
take a look
that.
at that? Let's
I'm
take a
sorry?
look at that area. There seems to be a lot of areas across the road from there that are vacant.
So I think I would be happy to present alternative locations as we studied it in the next meeting. One of the largest concepts that we did study within our master plan is exactly that. Where can we locate that? And I think that would be a great great section for the next meeting if the task
Sounds
force
good.
is okay with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And one other thing, if buildings were built on existing airport land without expanding into green space off the existing airport, wouldn't those buildings be subjected to this very same taxes?
I don't have an answer to that question, but something that I think we brought up earlier on the possibility of the future taxes.
In other words, what you're saying is it doesn't matter where, if it's a commercial building, it would be subjected to taxes. No matter, because if you change the zoning for these 10 acres to make it airport, then something that's already airport would be subject to taxes. So this tax argument is bogus. There's so much land on this airport. There's
James, thank you
hundreds
for
of
your
acres.
questions. There will be opportunity for public comment at further
You're
meetings
not going to interrupt me.
in the future.
There's
And we're
so many hundreds of acres of airport land that are not being used, and there's no
James,
reason.
this is limited to questions, and I think that this is sounding like feedback, and we want feedback, and please understand that. But what we're trying to do tonight, because we still have another portion
Okay,
of our
I'll
meeting
frame
that
it
we
as a
need to
question.
complete.
I have a question. I'll frame it as, isn't it true that you have hundreds of acres of land? And isn't it true
This isn't
that
an
there are vacant
interrogation.
parts of
Why
this
don't
land?
you write your
Isn't it
questions
true as a
down and mail
question?
them in?
You don't like my
I'd like to make a
questions because you're
motion that
biased
we
against
move to
this
the
point of
next
view.
section of the agenda, because we're already late and we're going to absolutely have future meetings, and I want to make sure that I'm not trying to step on anybody. So I make a
Exactly what you're doing is you're stepping on.
point number
So is
5.
the airport owned
I don't
by
know
a
if anyone wants
private
to say
entity?
that.
I'll second
Somebody
it.
said that this was a private land and it could be
Is
fenced.
there any other conversation about my motion?
No.
Do we have the okay to, yep.
No, she can't. Because we're not doing that now.
Well, the
It-
problem is he asks a question and then doesn't let anyone answer.
And he answers
There are
it himself.
statements being made. We're trying to get feedback, right? And we still have another portion to discuss. This is an organizational meeting and we're all listening right now.
And
But
we
there's going to
do-
be the reason this task force exists is over until April. We're going to be taking in a lot, and we're already an hour over our agenda time.
And we do still have Bob Atchison, who stated previously in the chat that he has a clarifying question. Bob, is that still true?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I'll hold back on my motion, because I don't want to, my intention is not to hold back everybody, but I'm concerned that we are late in our agenda.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bob, you
Can
can
you
ask
hear
your
me?
question.
Can you hear me
Yes.
all right?
Yes.
Okay. I come to you as with a couple of different hats. One is that I'm a retired member of the Rail and Aviation Bureau from the state of Vermont, VTrans, so I do have some knowledge of airports. I'm also the energy coordinator from the town of Plainfield, and I'm also a member of Vermont Extinction Rebellion. So as a combination of those, I would ask you as a committee if you are aware of the carbon footprint of air travel, i.e. emissions per passenger mile compared to other forms of transportation. And are you just making a general assumption that airports are good, airports need to be bigger, more planes need to be in the air, and more pollution needs to be spewed?
Bob, at this
Question,
point, I don't think any of
question,
the task force members have any information about air emissions. This is also our first meeting dealing with this rezoning request and reviewing this rezoning request. So unless
okay,
any task force members do have specific information to share, I think the answer to that would be that is not information that we have explored at this point.
okay, thank you. Does South Burlington or Burlington have a declaration of climate emergency in their records, and does that impact with certain goals, such as net zero by 2040, net zero by 2050. And I'm sorry to say that whether the city of Burlington exists within your realm of jurisdiction, they are still part of what's a pollution island in the middle of your entity.
Well, the City Council of South Burlington did sign on to the Paris Accord, or not sign on to the accord, but had a resolution in support of that. I don't know what Burlington, the city of Burlington has done about that. I believe they have something similar, but I don't really know. But I know that is an important topic and goals for the city of South Burlington. So I think your point that applying some of that to this consideration is a good one.
Okay.
And that needs to probably be fleshed out.
I would also
Can we please
suggest
keep future questions directed to Nick Longo, because we have him tonight and we're just taking in, we're trying to organize here and have our one last piece with our
All right.
consultant who's waiting to talk to us. So do you have more questions for Nick?
I would just ask that in consideration of having already a maintenance facility, albeit undersized or inadequate parking for mega snowplows, have you considered trying to consolidate that into one place? And are you thinking that you may be enabling more taxiway, more runway, more capacity for more planes to be flying and polluting by doing such a thing? And why not keep that land 10 acres as a buffer zone, which makes you a better neighbor for the neighborhood if you've got a tree line buffer zone where you've already got 2 green lots to begin with. Just make it contiguous.
So the question is, are you planning on adding runway area to where the old snowplow facility is?
No, there's no plans for additional runways. In fact, our master plan removes one of our existing runway, a portion of the length and the pervious surfaces associated with it. This particular location or relocation of the very conceptual snow building or maintenance building, or any building in that particular area, because we have not studied it, is purely for our existing equipment today, a highly needed facility. No taxiways, no runways are going to be adjusted because of this.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
So if there are no further questions, clarifying questions to Nick Longo from the airport at this time, we would move to agenda item number 5, which is a presentation from the consultant who is hired by the city of South Burlington, Brandy Saxton.
Great, thank you. Can I get screen sharing privileges, Kelsey?
Yes, just a second.
So I missed the round of introductions at the beginning, caught in the alternate meeting space in the alternate universe. But I'm, as you know, here, Brandy Saxton, a land use planner. I've been doing land use planning work in Vermont for 20 some years. I've done some previous work with the city on other projects. It's been a few years. But I am quite familiar with South Burlington and its surroundings. I'm now over on the other side of Vermont in the Upper Valley area. I used to be a Champlain Valley person. And so that is me, and I'm going to be very quick because I know that you are anxious to be done with the first task force meeting. So I did want to provide just a little brief overview of the process. I had been talking with Paul about this project on and off for a little while, and we sort of came up with a structure, and we've now further refined that based on the fact that Kelsey is on board. And So what we are envisioning is essentially this 4-step process. So tonight being the very start of the first thing, forming the task force and having the airport present their zoning request. Between now and when you meet again in the latter part of January, we're going to be putting together a detailed status memo for you that will distill a lot of the important pieces of information that you're going to need as task force members to work through the policy choices in front of you. And then we are going to transition over to really putting together a policy options memo, as was alluded to. You have a full menu of options in front of you. It's not a one or the other choice. There are other options, and we'll be talking through that and helping structure those so you can work your way through and give direction as to what you want to see developed for potential plan or regulatory language if you do want to go in that direction of amending the zoning. We also have a community engagement phase. I think, as was mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we anticipate that probably kicking off towards the end of February or into March, where we are cognizant of other community meeting schedules and things like that. So we're going to work on that schedule and try to figure out when the best point is. But we have 2 meetings in mind. So a neighborhood concerns meeting to take feedback, well, not really feedback, to really hear what the priorities and concerns of the neighborhood members are, to help you figure out what you want to be looking at from a policy and recommendation point of view. And that will be sort of before we get to the point of doing any writing. And then as we do start to do writing, having a second community response meeting to present some initial ideas and take feedback on those. And then that would transition over to further committee and task force discussion and the putting together of a final report with your recommendation contained in it. So, and the goal being to get that done ideally by the end of April, with recognition that you've got until the end of May if this process does take longer. So that's the 4-step process. I'm open to answering any questions that you've got or discussion you want to have around procedural matters, but that's what we are initially envisioning.
At this point, are there any questions about the process from members of the task force?
As always, I have a question. So we obviously heard tonight, well, I'm gonna, that's an assumption. I think that this concern about going just directly to the pre-existing airport zoning is, probably going to be problematic. So at what point would it be helpful for Brandy to get even some initial feedback from us, or do we all want to make sure there's community feedback first before she starts putting too much time into her work? Like what are the input dates, and is it input from the task force before input from community, or is it input from community then the task force discusses that, or how does that work?
Brandy, I don't know if you would like to answer that.
Yeah, I can jump in on it. So at your January 20 meeting, one of the things we're going to have is a more robust project schedule that will have a specific answer to that question. We haven't worked through the schedule to that degree yet, but that's the next, basically in this, as part of that status memo and sort of project getting things organized, that will be in there. What we're envisioning is the production of this policy options menu thinking of Memo, I said menu, thinking of it as a menu really for you to be choosing from. I do a lot of zoning work with planning commissions and communities, and it's it's useful to present that range of what your options are, and then have the discussion rather than sitting in a meeting with a committee trying to generate what their options are. You know, as we can give you some sense of what's actually viable to options in front of you to choose amongst, and then if you want to see something developed, you know, in a certain direction, we can go in that direction. So that is envisioned to happen in that second phase of work. So that would be picking up in January and probably be on your plates for the February meetings. And then that would be followed by that first community meeting, then some more committee discussion, another community meeting, and your final report. So that's roughly thinking through it. But next month there'll be a detailed schedule.
And so just to summarize, there is a little bit of an opportunity for an iterative process where Brandy produces some options, the task force considers them, it goes to the public, Brandy can modify options, it will go back to the task force. There can also be the public meeting after that. And so it can go through a few cycles of that before we end up on a final recommendation.
Yeah, we were sort of envisioning a 2-cycle system.
I'm wondering if there's any thoughts about the actual community engagement process itself, because I think it's going to be exceptionally challenging. I think we're going into probably an incredible wave of COVID from the new variant, and people are exhausted, like ridiculously exhausted. And so trying to get people engaged in much of anything outside of just putting one foot in front of the other is a hell of a challenge. Excuse my language. So I'm just wondering if there's any thoughts on what does that look like. To date, there really hasn't been any outreach to the community to make them aware beyond what maybe individuals in the task force have done. And so I'm just wondering what that looks like to make sure that the neighborhood is aware early and can start thinking about this. I don't know. It's just like, it seems like it's going to be exceptionally challenging in the environment that we're going to be operating in.
Brandy, would you like to speak to how this will be publicized to the community and how these engagement meetings will proceed?
Yeah, and I agree. These are challenging times to try to do public engagement, as you know, but we will do our absolute best to provide ways for people to engage in response to whatever public health conditions are. So that's just the way business has to be conducted at this point. But so we're definitely envisioning that there's going to be a web page put up on the city website that will be a clearinghouse of information about this. There will be regular updates in the e-newsletter that comes out from the city about the project. And then once we have these dates set for these meetings, those will be widely advertised using the normal processes that the city uses to do that. So those systems will definitely be in place. You know, now that the project is kicking off officially tonight, those wheels will start turning.
Does that answer your question, Isaac?
Yeah.
Great. Are there any other questions about process from the task force?
Not process, no. Brandy, I wonder if you can produce a document that would tell us who owns what property in the area west of the airport, and what it's zoned, and what the airport is proposing in their master plan.
I think the status memo will definitely include some mapping components to help present the information. I think that will be effective. I've written down the note of what you're looking for. So as we're putting together that memo, I will keep that request in mind.
Give us a context for what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
further questions for Brandy from the task force? Okay. Are there any members of the public who have process-related questions for Brandy? Seeing none. We'll move to agenda number 6, other business. Does anyone have any other business that they would like to bring to the task force at this point? Seeing none. I think I would entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. Has to come from one of you.
I move we adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
This meeting is adjourned.
Nick, I'm assuming